I don't mind if you fail at something, but if you can fail at something and have a transferable piece of knowledge out of it that you can go take with you to your next gig, I think that's a different type of failure. It's a transferable failure.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to win, we come to fly. This is where we make our dreams come to life. Welcome to Innovation City.
Welcome to Innovation City, a podcast featuring the innovators, disruptors, and creators who are making things happen. My name is Michael T. Johnson, and I'm here with my co-host, Tyler Kelly. And tonight we're in Venture Cafe St. Louis. So if you've never been to a Venture Cafe, it is the largest gathering of innovators, disruptors, creators anywhere in the world. So every Thursday, if you're near Venture Cafe City, I suggest you attend. It's a great time. We're very excited tonight because we have David Karandish with us. David, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
David, welcome. David is the CEO at Jane.ai. He's worked in the tech sector for over 17 years, focused primarily on online advertising, software as a service, and artificial intelligence. As the founder and CEO of Jane, he focuses on making all company intelligence accessible, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a kind of like a Siri for the workplace type way, which is what Jane is, right? Mm-hmm. And prior to that, CEO of Answers.com, a company that he sold to a private equity firm for upwards of $900 million with his partner, Chris Sims. And they went on to found Equity.com, which is an incubator focused on investing, building, and growing high-performing tech businesses like Varsity, Tutors, and, of course, Jane. And you're also highly involved in the nonprofit sector, really kind of attempting to bridge that digital divide here in St. Louis through nonprofits like Create a Loop. And so, like, off the air, you just mentioned, like, you're going 100 miles per hour, and it's no secret why. Like, you're a pretty busy person, so thanks for being on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Obviously, you have, like, a long track record of these tech startups that are successful. So tell me where all that started. Like, where did that fire start for you to do that?
So I've always loved to create things. I remember as a kid, one of my favorite movies was Back to the Future. I always had model DeLoreans in the basement, thinking about traveling through time. And so I just love to build things in all sorts of different areas and arenas of life. And I can remember I was a Cub Scout as a kid, but I couldn't tie knots or put tents together. And my dad is an immigrant, and he didn't know any of the creeds, and my mom can't sew, so we didn't have a lot of patches on my on my arms here. So I wasn't really I didn't know how I would fit in with that, but I can remember as a kid selling the candy drives and that sort of thing. And so this combination of being somebody who likes to create and build things and someone who likes to go out and sell and hustle a bit is something I've had since I was a little kid. I was always doing experiments in the kitchen and driving my very patient parents crazy with everything I was up to.
So you went to Wash U. You were computer science plus entrepreneurial studies. So with that, like, you're primed to do something big. But did you ever expect you'd do something as big as Answers.com?
You know, I had no idea. I mean, I just wanted to build something, and I'm now on my 8th startup. The first 6 failed hard, paid for a few pizzas, and generated a few laughs along the way. And then Answers grew to a rather sizable company, $250 million in revenue, and it's been an amazing journey. I've been very blessed. I've got to live out an American dream in 35 years.
Wow. So I'd love to get a little insight into, like, that progression, just that, like, learning experience, like when you go from 10 people working on a project to 100 to 200, and you're like, oh my gosh, this is like a real thing. Like, what's going through the mind of the person that is leading that at each stage of development?
So I think early on in a startup's life, a lot of what you're trying to figure out is should we exist in the marketplace? Like, what is it? Like, is somebody going to do the unnatural act of opening up their wallet and paying you for your products or services? And early on in my career, I started out doing web page design as an example. And in that case, in the late 90s, if you could design a web page, you were somewhere between a wizard and a warlock in terms of your mystical powers. But I realized pretty early that business model was tough because you were out scrapping for every customer that you bring on. We then started doing some custom web development, and the idea there was that, hey, maybe we could actually reuse some of our work across multiple clients. But the keyword was custom web development, so it wasn't as reusable as we thought. And so my buddy Chris and I were doing these ventures all the way since high school. A lot of, it didn't look like success if you would have looked at it and been like, what in the world are these kids doing? They need to go get some real jobs. But like I said, my parents were very supportive. My mom, my dad, my stepdad, my stepmom, and just helping us, explore and enjoy that time as a high schooler to be able to learn and kind of cut your teeth. And then by the time I got to college, we were continuing to expand some of these entrepreneurial activities. And my buddy ended up getting an internship at a local company here called Monster Commerce, and I joined pretty quickly thereafter. They were developing out some shopping cart software, but at the time, they were one of the first companies to utilize SEO to rank at the top of Google. And so we got to learn how search engine marketing could be a huge driver for a business's success. And so we were like sponges, just soaking up the knowledge that we got working in this startup. And that ultimately led us to go out on our own and start what was originally a comparison shopping engine and then eventually became Answers.com.
Awesome.
One of the things I'm curious about is you just mentioned like the 6 failed startups prior to your successful company. So I'm curious what you learned in that process that helped you be successful in Answers.
So a couple of things. I think the first thing is that it's a lot easier to fail when the stakes are low. So I don't know if all my kids or any of my kids are going to want to be entrepreneurs, but if they do want to be entrepreneurs, I'd love them to do it before they graduate college and to try that out in high school or in college than after, because the stakes are a lot lower at that time. People are more willing to help you. Your friends will join you for pizza instead of real salaries and things like that. You'll work for pizza instead of real salaries. And so I think there's a resilience that you can build up if you've learned how to fail when you haven't put it all out on the line. Then when you do get a chance to put it all out on the line, you've kind of built up that mental muscle, and like, hey, here are the things that worked, here are the things that haven't worked. I'd say the second thing that I really noticed was that even in the biggest failures, we were able to leverage a lot of what we learned into that kind of next biggest poker table in terms of the next thing we were going to work on. And so I don't mind if you fail at something, but if you can fail at something and have a transferable piece of knowledge out of it that you can go take with you to your next gig, that'll help that next thing go better. I think that's a different type of failure. It's a transferable failure.
Then there's the big payoff, right? After all those years of hard work, and then was there like time off? Was there like just getting right back into it on the next project? Had you already been thinking through like your next mission, or like what's that look like for somebody that gets acquired or sells, that sort of thing? What goes through your head then? Yeah,
I mean, businesses are very personal, so it's not like selling an old car or you don't just list it on Auto Trader and somebody comes in and buys it. I think that I was in my last company for 10 and a half years, most of my adult career. And so I wanted to take a little bit of time off to figure out what I wanted to do next. And I got 4 kids, under 7. I had 3 at the time, I think 1 in the oven. And my wife and I went up to the mountains of Montana and spent some time in Big Sky and just tried to decompress and figure out what we want this next chapter of our lives to be like. And at the same time, I had this long laundry list of ideas. So sometimes when you're in a particular field or a particular job or a particular market, you're so accustomed to seeing things as they are each day. When you get out of that environment, you get this just tsunami of ideas that came in. So I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do next, and got this long list, and some of them were more ridiculous, and some of them were even more ridiculous than that. But when I looked at it, I said, I want to do something where I have the potential to do this for another 10 years plus. And therefore, it's going to be really important that I pick something that I can really believe in and get behind. And so I heeded some advice that I had heard from Jeff Bezos, not directly, but from an article or something. And he did kind of one of those magic quadrant 4 boxes where they were asking him early on, they said, Jeff, why'd you start Amazon? And he basically said, my synopsis here is, he said, if he starts Amazon and e-commerce takes off, then, he's got a good chance of being successful. If he doesn't start Amazon and e-commerce doesn't take off, well, it's kind of a null case. If he starts it and Amazon and e-commerce fails as a category, he's going to learn a lot. He's going to get some bruises and bumps, but there's probably some transferable learnings to his next gig. But if he doesn't start Amazon and this e-commerce thing takes off and does what he thought it would, he would regret it the rest of his life. And so very similarly, when I was thinking about what I wanted to do next, I wanted to look at what kind of technology was going to have a massive impact on the way we work. And I looked at artificial intelligence and the rise of Siri and Alexa, and I thought, for my next gig, I want to do something in this AI space. And I knew that if I didn't do an artificial intelligence startup next, I would regret it the rest of my life. So that's how I picked.
So tell me about Jane.ai, so that idea, where it came from, what it does, all those things.
So super high level, Jane is your company's first AI-powered team member. You could think of her like Siri or Alexa, but applied to the workplace. She's going to take all your company intel and make it accessible in a simple chat window. Peter Thiel has a book called 0 to 1, and hold his politics aside, we won't talk about that on air. But he talks about how a lot of times great companies have a secret that they figured out. Right? So when Google was first starting, their secret was that your links are a pretty good proxy for the quality of your website. They were one of the first companies out there to really take the link graph into account instead of just ranking you based on your meta text. Now, the secret sauce is how they actually do that, but the secret's actually pretty digestible. The secret that we zeroed in on pretty early is that most companies, your corporate intelligence is this giant mess. It's all over the place. It's hard to find information. It's this big, we actually have a diagram in our PowerPoint presentation. It looks like a big spaghetti mess. But the secret that we've stumbled upon is that all of your company intel can be found in 3 places and 3 places alone. It's either in your apps, it's in your documents, or it's in the knowledge of your team. And so if you want to make all your corporate intelligence accessible seamlessly, easily, you got to be able to plug into your app stack, you got to be able to mine your documents, you got to be able to learn from your team members. And so we set out to build, use a Lord of the Rings analogy, kind of one bot to rule them all. In terms of an AI platform that can connect to your apps, your documents, and your people, and really help you, as an organization, save a lot of wasted time. But the other side of that coin is really we want to help you do your best work. Nobody likes looking up information in all these systems. Nobody likes wasting time. We want you freed up so you can go do your best work.
So I saw a presentation that you were doing for Jane at a mortgage convention, right? So the idea that I got is like the real world application, like your proof in Jane is you're applying that to the mortgage industry right now. Tell me about why you chose that industry and why you see that it's going to really help.
Yeah, great question. So when we started, we started building out these app integrations. So one of the first ones we did was connecting Jane to my Google Calendar. So if I want to know when's my next meeting with Doug, I can just ask Jane that question. She'll go into my calendar, come back and say, hey, David, you're meeting with Doug on Thursday. So that we call them the big six, where the initial apps we focused on your email, your calendar, your HR system, your CRM, your ticketing platform, and your cloud drive. And most organizations have some combination of those. So we started doing these initial app integrations, and as we started talking with companies, what we found is that in particular verticals, there might be a vertical-specific app that companies run their whole business on. So in the case of the mortgage industry, a lot of mortgage companies are run off of Ellie Mae's Encompass platform, which is their big loan origination software. Think of it like their CRM and ERP hybrid together. When we looked at the software, we're like, wow, this is really challenging to navigate. You got all these fields, and it's been built over many years, and then all these regulatory guidelines that you want to pair up with this information. And so instead of having to go click through a bunch of screens, imagine if you could just say, what's the loan to value ratio on the Johnson loan? Or, how much, what kind of down payment do we need for a Fannie Mae loan? And we'd go into those systems and pull back. And so we didn't necessarily start Jane specifically for the mortgage industry, but what we uncovered was that categories like mortgage, other areas of financial services, insurance, recruiting, we haven't done this one yet, but property management has a similar characteristics, where your information is scattered all over the place. It's highly transactional. You got an on-the-go workforce, so it's hard to pull the information up on your phone. It's something where the timeliness matters a lot. In a rising interest rate environment, locking in your rate for your loan is particularly important. And it's something where we can be a good 3 generations ahead of what else is out there in the marketplace, the same way that when the first iPhone came out, it was really 2-3 generations ahead of your BlackBerry or Trio or Razor flip phone or whatever else we were using at the time. So you could think of the way we're building the company as a horizontal across those major apps that everybody uses. And then we're going deeper in the verticals where, particularly in the mid-market, we can go connect to your industry-specific CRM. When we get into larger enterprise companies, we'll typically focus on three big apps: Salesforce, ServiceNow, and Workday, representing your CRM, your ticketing platform, and your HRIS.
That's good insight. It kind of helps me to think about like what you think about when you're thinking about like where to launch something like Jane, where it's not going to fail, but it's going to like get traction.
Exactly.
And so it's nice to know that those are the things that you're looking at.
Yeah.
Digital divide.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to ask about. Was I think I've heard part of your story before where you talk about like learning to code at an early age, and I'm assuming there's some connection to like what that did for you and kind of your passion for bridging that divide with people that don't have that opportunity right now. So can you talk about that?
Sure. So my dad was working at a company that was basically getting rid of all of their old tech, which at the time there wasn't a lot of recycling going on, which meant all the old computers were going out to the trash. And so he brought home this computer that was literally about to get thrown away. And it was really my first computer that I could call my own and learn how to code on. And, bringing on computer science both as a more of a hobby and an interest, and then later as a study, totally changed the direction of my life in terms of I found a an outlet from which to take my creative and salesmanship and interests and entrepreneurialness and go put it to use. And so, I really enjoyed the ability to create in a digital way, and a way that you could be a little bit of a David versus Goliath against bigger companies if you have a digital edge. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't have that same opportunity. I talk about this a lot, but in the state of Missouri, we do somewhere between 2 to 2.5 years of earth science education, which is great. I like science. I'm all for stalactites and stalagmites, but we don't have any mandated computer science in our state. And I think that's a real shame, because even countries like the UK have adopted a system where you will not graduate the 5th grade without doing a year of computer science. And so I looked at this big giant gap in the market, and I said, look, I want to be able to help kids get the same opportunities that I did in terms of learning computer science early on. Now, will that mean you're going to get another Mark Zuckerberg out of our program? Maybe, maybe not. But even if you understand how technology works, the trajectory of your life can go very differently in terms of the types of work you can go do. So a buddy of mine, mutual acquaintance of ours, came to me and said, David, I'd really like you to help me with this after-school program I'm doing. It's got karate, and it's got snacks, and it's got life coaching, and it's got all these different aspects to it. And it was kind of a little bit all over the place. And I was like, man, I got too much going on. He's like, well, we got a big coding component to it. So my ears kind of perked up a bit. We started talking, and we said, I think this is something I could go get behind. And as we started having more conversations, what I realized is that a place like St. Louis, we've got a lot of nonprofits already. I really don't want to create the umpteenth nonprofit and then have to go pass the basket out all the time. Really like, if we're going to do a nonprofit here, let's do something where there's a business model built in. To try to think about what that looked like. So the irony, for those of you not super familiar with St. Louis, there's a pretty big socioeconomic and racial divide north of Del Mar in our city versus south of Del Mar. And so in a kind of a twist of irony, if you want to go reach the kids north of Del Mar and give them a better tech education, the way to do that, or one way to do that we kind of latched onto, was to do kind of a 1-for-1 model. So for every one kid who joins our program, we'll do a paid model where you pay to join this computer science club. You get access to either after school or Saturday morning tutoring sessions, and you're with other kids in your same age bracket where you're learning the fundamentals of computer science. But for every one kid who can afford to be there, we'll go provide a scholarship for one kid who couldn't afford to be there. And in doing so, we have some pretty radical inclusion in terms of our program. So it's roughly 50-50 between boys and girls. Same thing, roughly 50-50 between black and white. We've got about 40% of the kids are full fare, about 40% of the kids are full scholarship, and about 20% of the kids are on some form of partial scholarship. And so, we launched this last year, single class. We added a second class, a third class. Now we're up to 5+ classes, another few starting up in the spring, and we've got over 100 kids who are going through the program itself. Super exciting to see it change the face of St. Louis.
Yeah. What's the impact you've seen so far and some of the kids there? Have you seen an impact so far in the short time you've been?
We've seen a huge impact, and there's a little bit of a pro-tech, anti-tech view in the parenting circles and the literature and all of this, and I take a little more of a nuanced view. I'm not someone who thinks your kid should be consuming many hours of media. Like, I think there's a limit to that, and it's good. Like, we have fairly limited screen time in our house at home. But we really want to direct kids toward being creators in tech, not consumers. So if kids are building things in their time, it's very different than passively sitting back and consuming. And so we've seen kids who never did anything from a computer standpoint, but would play video games for 3 hours a day, who are now saying, wow, I could go build that video game one day. Or, hey, I am building this video game right now. Or I can see how I could get to the point where I could do something like this. And that's just amazing for kids as young as 3rd grade.
Yeah, that makes me think of a question, because I think it's pretty applicable to a lot of people that have kids. They kind of wrestle with the same thing you're talking about. As I know that, like, my kids, they have tablets, and I hope that they don't just sit there and consume media the whole time, like you're saying. But what are some ways they can get started to creating things with the technology?
Yeah. So one thing I would strongly advocate for, my oldest daughter is doing this, is we use Swift Playgrounds. It's a iPad program that will teach you the Swift programming language, but the kids are creating and solving puzzles along the way as they do it, and it saves all of their work, so you can go back and review it. You can they have a lesson plan that comes with it, so you can go through that with your kids to the extent that you want. But they're learning the fundamentals of computer science, but at the same time, it's very gamified and it's very kid friendly, and so that's just one app of many that you can use and say, hey, spend some time here, and I'd be pretty surprised if they don't get hooked on it.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So, Jane, Create a Loop, equity.com, and Varsity Tutors. Is there anything that you want to mention about Varsity Tutors
about Varsity
before
Tutors.
we?
So, Chuck Cohn, the CEO there, started Varsity Tutors back coming out of college, where he said he was looking for a tutor, and it was hard to find one in a particular subject. So he said, there really should be an online marketplace where I can go in and say, oh, I need a calculus tutor or whatever, and then make that happen. And so he started it. He had self-funded it, grew the company, and then was starting to bring on some outside investment. And Chris and I, through our equity.com investment partnership, came in and did the first outside round in Varsity Tutors. Well, at the time we invested, Chuck was so excited because he said, David, if you think this product is cool now, in a year or two, we're going to move the tutoring session from being match online, tutor offline, to match online, tutor online. And I was like, yeah, Chuck, that sounds like a great idea. Let's not bank on that, right? Mm-hmm. He was so right. And the reason that this is so fascinating is that historically, tutoring is very tied to the supply curve of where you can find tutors. So it's easy to find a algebra tutor or maybe a Spanish tutor here in St. Louis. It might be harder to find a Russian tutor. Well, now with the tutoring sessions being done online, you can schedule them at your leisure, and your tutor doesn't have to be co-located in the same geo. In fact, they could be in St. Petersburg for all you care. So it's really changed the entire face of tutoring. Company's doing very well. I have the pleasure of being able to serve on the board of directors there, and we're very excited for it to be first big equity.com win.
That's awesome. So, Jane.ai, how can people learn more, get in touch with your people there, and just all of the above, social media?
Yeah, so you can check out our website at Jane.ai. And my email address is david@Jane.ai. You can email me directly, and we'll get you connected with the right folks to talk with.
Awesome. And where can we find you on social?
Honestly, go to the Jane blog. It's listed right off the website.
Awesome.
All of our latest articles.
David, thanks for being on the show. This was a pleasure.
Thanks for having me. Yeah, appreciate it.
For more episodes, visit innovationcity.co. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review. If you're in St. Louis, visit us on a Thursday night. You can find details at vincafstl.org. You can also connect with us on social at We Are Slam or at Venture Cafe STL.
This is where it all begins, so say goodbye to all your fears, all your doubts. This is where they die. This is where we come to